AI is taking center stage at the ATxSummit here in Singapore. Leaders are discussing what comes next for the technology as it transforms quickly. The focus is on how AI is being used as questions remain over trust and safety. CNA's Sarah Al-Khaldi is at the event and she joins us live. Sarah?
Yeah, Ronnie, as AI becomes more powerful, pressure is certainly there, and it's growing for clearer rules and regulations to prevent its misuse, and policymakers are facing the challenge of balancing innovation, safety, as well as national security. Now, to discuss all this, we've got here with us Karan Bhatia, Global Head of Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google. Karan, thanks so much for joining us here. So Google has just announced an expansion of its AI partnership with Singapore. What gap does this partnership hope to fill that maybe government agencies could not achieve on their own?
So look, we've been proud to be in Singapore for 2 decades, and throughout that time we had a really close relationship with the government. And 4 years ago, launched our first AI partnership. We were proud to be the first public-private partnership with the government of Singapore in the AI space. And what we've announced today just builds off of that partnership, really focusing on work in a few areas. One is bringing best-in-class AI solutions to the questions of healthcare. How do we strengthen healthcare in Singapore in new and innovative ways? Second is education, particularly the skilling of the workforce. So AI is this revolutionary technology, but it's only going to be effective if you have the workforce that's prepared for it. So that's a second. The third is working with new, innovative, often startups. So you're finding really interesting solutions being brought into the market by the startup community here. So we're working with the Singaporean government on that. So these are the kinds of things that we're advancing through this partnership, and it's exciting to think about sort of what might come going forward.
Yeah, and you cover public policy at Google. When we take a look at the different regulatory approaches around the world, we've got Europe that seems to be stricter, US more innovation focused, and others that are kind of caught in between. So how does Google plan to operate in an environment like that?
So look, we're a very global company, and we recognize that there are going to be different approaches taken by different jurisdictions around the world, and we try to build products and take approaches that work for the jurisdictions that we operate in. Certainly, we're at a really important time here with the evolution of this new technology of artificial intelligence, and so one of the things that we have urged is that we be, as a public-private partnership, that we work together, right? That there be a collaboration between industry and government as we're trying to figure out this new technology together. What we've always said about AI is that AI is too important not to regulate, but it's also too important not to regulate smartly. And so we have to be thinking about sort of allowing the innovation to proceed in ways that are yielding amazing solutions, amazing assets to address fundamental human challenges, but also making sure that we have the right guardrails on. And that's something that we're working with each jurisdiction around the world as they're trying to work their way through that challenge.
Yeah. So most recently, Anthropic's Mythos has sparked a lot of concern about how far AI can go and what happens if it ends up in the wrong hands. So as new models kind of improve and go online, who has the responsibility in your mind to decide whether a model should be released to the public?
So look, I think this is the perfect example of where you're going to need the public and private sector to work together. We've always sort of acknowledged that models, as they get more and more powerful, are going to create potentially risks like the ones that are particularly being associated with cybersecurity right now. But they're also bringing incredible solutions to bear. And just to give an example, at Google, we have piloted this combination of technologies, one called Big Sleep, and the other called CodeMender, which allows the AI to do an amazing job in sort of detecting where potential vulnerabilities are in the Big Sleep, and then CodeMender to actually go ahead and fix those vulnerabilities quickly. You know, so the defender's dilemma is always trying to stay one step ahead of actors who would utilize the technology to do bad things. So we've got to get ahead of that, and that's the kind of space that we've been working with governments on to try and figure out how do we leverage this amazing technology to achieve that end.
And when it comes to compensation, Google is facing in Australia the decision whether to have deals with news publications or face a levy. That's separate from AI. But even with AI, there are concerns about how publishers can be compensated for providing information that these chatbots refer to. How do you think that should be addressed?
Yeah, well, just firstly, briefly on Australia, we have always, whether in Australia or elsewhere, had partnerships with news publishers. We've actually been quite active in sort of helping support the ecosystem there, and so we're hoping that as that process evolves, it's going to end up in a place where we can continue to maintain that. But look, more broadly, what you're seeing, I think, with the expansion of AI globally is this question that you're alluding to that does come up around access to the content on the open internet, on the web, that is being used to train models. And we think that there is so much at stake in countries or communities being able to have the core capability or the core assets of the region, of the jurisdiction, be trained on the models. You want models to be developed that actually reflect the language, the culture of whatever country it is. So we do think that's an important factor to be borne in mind when figuring out what that right set of policies are.
Yeah. And you've previously worked for U.S. trade policy. And are we seeing more AI trade nationalism right now? U.S. and China, they're looking to talk about AI, but do countries just want to have control of the whole AI ecosystem?
Look, I think everybody is sort of coming to terms with what artificial intelligence, this amazing new technology, means in terms of trade dynamics, in terms of strategic dynamics. So there is naturally going to be that connection between government and technology. Historically, that's happened, and you're seeing it now happen here. I do think that you're seeing signs of nationalism, technology nationalism, arising as we see AI come to the fore, whether it is through forced localization of technologies in some cases, or simply just investing in indigenous models that will be developed. Our own view of it is, again, each country is kind of going to figure out its own path on this. But what I think every country has a strong interest in is making sure that they don't get left behind in this race, right? It's truly a competitive dynamic. As I visit with ministers around the world, the number one question that I get is, how do I make sure that my country, my industry, my people remain at the cutting edge of this technology? And that is going to require, I think, not isolating oneself from what's happening in the global industry, but leaning into it. So those are the kinds of discussions that certainly we see playing out at fora like this.
Karan, really appreciate your time today. Karan Bhatia there, Global Head of Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google. And Ronnie, that's the latest for me here at the ATxSummit.
Thank you, Sarah. That was Sarah Al-Khaldi reporting live from ATX in Singapore.